In 2015, a team of explorers and researchers walked into the Honduran jungle. They were following LiDAR images, pale grids, and plazas hidden under the trees. When the team finally reached the valley, they found real ruins, real earthworks, real sculptures. They also brought something back with them. Who built this hidden place? Why was it abandoned? And what does it mean when the land itself seems to fight against anyone who tries to map it? Welcome to the Time and Tales podcast. Dark history, strange lore, one tale at a time. New episodes come out every week, wherever you listen. And as always, sources and links are available in the show notes. Welcome. I'm Lene.
Hey, and I'm CJ.
And we're going to tell you a spooky, mysterious, lost city kind of story today. It is officially our second episode, and we're finally learning our equipment, which is, it's been a bit of a learning curve.
It sure has, yeah.
Yeah. And figuring out the space in the room, that's another issue. Like, I struggle to speak to CJ unless I can see him, and I can't see him. He's behind me, so I know he's like making faces at me, and I just can't deal.
None of that is true. Absolutely none of that is true. Also, she calls this the pod lab.
It is now the pod lab. It used to be my office, and now it is the pod lab because the only thing that we're doing in here is recording podcasts. So yeah, second episode time. How do you feel about this today, CJ?
I'm feeling pretty good about it. I do like the way that you've arranged this room. So as co-host and as kind of your guest here.
You're also a host. No, you're not a co-host.
Co-host is second host.
You are not second host.
You are the headliner.
Oh my God.
I'm replaceable.
No, you're not replaceable. And you are going to be telling me some of these stories eventually. So it's not just going to be me telling you stories.
I didn't sign up
to
for
start.
I did not.
Yes, you did. It's in the contract.
It's in the contract.
The contract. Sorry, that's a reference to a movie that I am still mad at. So we can get back to that another day.
It was fun.
So today's story takes place in Honduras, and I need to go ahead and preface this by saying I do not speak Spanish. CJ speaks a little Spanish. I speak a little French. So everything that I say is going to be tainted by French. I don't know why that happens. It just does. Our story today takes place in a very remote portion of the jungle in eastern Mosquitia. I have often mispronounced this as Mosquitia, and I believe it is Mosquitia. But please don't at me in the comments, okay? Okay. Doing my best. So CJ, you've actually been to Honduras, haven't you?
No, I have not been to Honduras.
What part of Central America have you been to?
I've been down as far as Panama.
Oh, wow. So are the jungles down there like super dense? Like, how are the bugs? How are you feeling about the bugs while you were there?
The bugs are amazing. Like, absolutely. It's just look around every single day is some kind of documentary. The bugs really are cool. Leafcutter ants are very, very, very cool. Everything.
What bug is that?
A leafcutter ant?
Yeah, I've never seen it. Oh, yeah. Actually, yes, I have. I've seen a documentary about that.
They're very large ants.
Have you ever seen a bullet ant before?
Is that an actual ant? I thought a bullet ant was a type of wasp.
No. So a bullet ant is an actual ant. And supposedly, if they bite you, it feels like you got shot with a bullet. And they are common in the jungles of Honduras, Central America, and northern South America. Another story that we'll do probably eventually is the story of Percy Fawcett exploring the Amazon, and bullet ants were a big problem for him and his crew. That's me out, you know? It's the bugs. I can't do the bugs. By the end of this story, you guys might not want to do the bugs either. Just saying.
I think that calling a place in the jungle after a mosquito is apropos.
Red flag. Here there be bites.
Name me a place.
You are going to come out of this region with bug bites. Just accept your fate. Let's go ahead and get to the episode. What say you?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Today's story covers La Ciudad Blanca, the White City. This is a legendary settlement said to be located in the Gracias a Dios department in eastern Honduras, which is mostly real thick jungle. Real thick. We're talking very nearly impassable jungle at that. The area is also known by the Petch name Cajakamasa, which means white town. This extensive area of rainforest, which includes the Rio Platano Biosphere Reserve, has long been the subject of multidisciplinary research. The predominant indigenous languages have included those in the Chibchan and Misu Malpan families. Due to the many variants of the story in the region, most professional archaeologists doubt that it refers to any one actual settlement, much less one representing a city in the pre-Columbian era. They point out that there are multiple large archaeological sites in the region and that references to the legendary White City cannot be proven to refer to any single place. So the Mosquitia region spans rainforest, river floodplains, and steep folded ranges along Honduras's eastern frontier. So it abuts the Atlantic Ocean. For millennia, indigenous communities, including the Petch, Miskitu, Tawaka, and Garifuna, use these river systems for travel, seasonal fields, and trade. In local and Spanish language lore, Ciudad Blanca appears as a place name and a motif, sometimes one city, sometimes many, well before modern expeditions. It is now referred to as the Valley of the Jaguar, and that was used by researchers very recently to refer to one specific basin in this wider region rather than a single legendary metropolis.
So, where did the legends of the White City come from?
In 1526, Hernan Cortes writes to Emperor Charles V. He describes a far inland province called Huaytapalan or Huacutaco. His indigenous informants say it's thick with towns and powerful chiefs. Spanish campaigns push deeper into what is now eastern Honduras. Not every party comes back. The jungle is steep, wet, and unforgiving. Men vanish into canyons and cloud forest and don't return. The ones who survive repeat what they were told, that there are richer lands farther in, bigger settlements. Stories of stone buildings and gold tableware merge into one idea, a single hidden city. A few decades later, Bishop Cristobal de Pedraza writes his own account. He records a report of a large inland city. Its people, he is told, eat from plates of gold. Again, it is described, not seen. His written version is cautious. Later readers are not. They remember the gold. Beneath all of this are older stories, stories that do not belong to Spain. They are explained as doorways, as origin points. Over centuries, outsiders mishear these translations. They fold them into the same bundle as Cortez's rich province and Pedraza's golden plates. By the 19th century, Ciudad Blanca is no longer a clear dot on a map. It's a direction, a rumor, a promise that somewhere under the canopy there is a city of pale stone that no outsider has truly ever seen. I read Douglas Preston's book, The Lost City of the Monkey God, probably about, I don't know, 5 years ago now?
It feels that way. Yeah.
Yeah, about 5 years ago now. And I was just so fascinated. Wow, it just completely it completely floored me. I was so fascinated, and then I had a rabbit hole for like 6 months straight, trying to learn everything I possibly could about Honduras and the indigenous peoples that live there and, what might have happened. How do you feel about this, CJ?
I love this sort of thing. It's the mystery, the magic of being there, the treasure hunt of it.
Right, yeah.
These people were completely isolated, yet thriving in their own way.
I think that the most fascinating part of the story for me is that it existed. Like all of these crackpots and wannabe archaeologists over like 140 years had supposedly entered the jungles of Honduras following the legends of conquistadors that had been there 400 years beforehand. And it turns out that those crackpots and those pseudo archaeologists were actually onto something. There was something there. And I think that that is the most fascinating part of it because the indigenous people who live there have the white city, the quote unquote White House, as part of their local legends. And that's what the conquistadors had picked up on. But we could never find any evidence of it. And then, so like all of these dudes just go out into the wild and try to find it themselves to varying levels of no success whatsoever.
Right. Some of them come back, some of them don't.
Yeah.
Nobody's had a good time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody. And like, it takes a machine to tell us that something is there.
One of the things I really enjoyed about the story or this particular legend is that this was a thriving city.
Yeah.
And people lived there. Eventually, they left it. The story stayed. The city got reclaimed by the jungle. I'm wondering what caused people to leave. Is it, is it the legend? Is the place cursed? What forced them out? Was it, yeah, plague or was it lack of food? It's really hard to know. Um,
Yeah,
but
we'll get into some of the theories about what happened to them like later on. But yeah, that is a fascinating. I don't think I mean, not to spoil the end of the episode, but I don't think that we probably will know if we ever do for a very, very long time.
right, it's possible that there could be some account or some clue that shows us exactly what caused them to leave.
Because again, like we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the jungle is not really a hospitable place for a civilization, right? So it's
Right.
one of those areas that would be technically considered a quote unquote food desert. So there aren't a lot of opportunities for people to grow food there unless they are engineering it in a way. And that's how the Maya were able to build their huge like collective culture around all of Central America for the most part. So like I wonder if it's not something similar, and I will describe some of the theories around that and how that comes into play.
So, what's going on in the time period between the conquistadors looking for El Dorado, or just people must have been looking for it?
Yeah.
So, what was going on? Do we have any record of people looking for it?
Oh, yeah, totally. During World War One, an archaeologist named Sylvanus Morley collected intelligence for the Office of Naval Intelligence while also undertaking an archaeological survey of the coastal rivers of Mosquitia. In 1924, archaeologist Herbert Spinman made an expedition to visit the site on the Rio Patuca and the Rio Platano in eastern Honduras, reporting on his experiences for an article in the New York Times. Spinman identified a culture whose material remains were found in a region that extended from central Honduras to eastern and northwestern Costa Rica. He reported, photographed, and described large, elaborately stone metates and cylindrical vessels that had been found as surface finds in Mosquitia and which he collected for the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University. And in the 1930s, F.A. Mitchell Hedges was commissioned by George Gustav Hay to explore the Mosquitia. In 1930, Mitchell Hedges returned from the jungle with information that a lost city with a giant monkey god statue buried underground was located deep in the mountains of Mosquitia, and that the natives called the city the lost city of the monkey god. Mitchell Hedges lost an eye during this expedition and suffered from diarrhea, malaria, and other conditions.
Ouch.
Yeah, right. That's like a triple whammy of no thank you. In 1933, archaeologist William Duncan Strong explored Honduras for the Smithsonian Institution, concentrating on the Bay Islands and northeastern part of the mainland. In his 1935 report on the expedition, Strong reports that the famed White City of the Paya, quote unquote, is said to reside in the upper Plantano region, according to local tradition. Another expedition was sponsored by the 1933 Honduran president Tiburcio Carayes. Explorer R. Stewart Murray was hired to lead the expedition, and he brought back a few artifacts and a rumor of a great ruin overrun by dense jungle. There's supposedly a lost city, he says, which the Indians call the city of the monkey god, he reported. They are afraid to go near it, for they believe that anyone who approaches it will, within the month, be killed by the bite of a poisonous snake. That is very, very interesting foreshadowing for later. And several more expeditions were sent out to the jungle with no actual fruitful evidence from thenceforward until a guy named Theodore Mord goes out to discover it in 1940. And we could probably do an episode about Mord another time. He was actually a spy during World War II and a self proclaimed archaeologist and adventurer. He wanted to be Percy Fawcett and disappear into the Amazon, you know? He came back with quite a lot of stories about the lost city of the monkey god. None of them have been substantiated. So, yeah, he kind of popularized the story for the newspapers and for enthusiasts at the time.
Are there any accounts for or of what the local people think about this?
There are, and we only know about the city at all from indigenous folklore and legends.
Hmm.
But what's happened here is that Europeans and people of European descent have taken these stories without context and just run wild with them, going around telling everybody that there's a lost city in the jungle and it's full of gold and it's full of all of these things when that's not implicitly what the natives say about their own land and their own culture. So this feels a lot like the legend of El Dorado in as much as the Spaniards took this information and took a legend, took a story as okay, well, that means that there must be cities full of gold all over the place. And I'm going to send my men out there to find that city because El Dorado didn't actually exist.
Oh, it didn't?
No.
I thought it just had a different name.
No, there is no actual city of gold called El Dorado. The legend of El Dorado is about a king of the Muisca people. Every single morning, he would have gold dust blown onto his skin, and then he would go out on a little boat in this lake, and he would jump in the lake, and the gold would be washed off him, and he would be, brand new and fresh for the day. And the Spaniards heard this story, and they took that to mean that the Muisca were rich in gold and that they had cities of literal gold where the streets were paved in gold and they had up with golden plates and like all of these different things. And that was the number one catalyst for the conquistadors going around all of Central and Southern America looking for people to destroy to take their gold. And it was just a legend. It wasn't necessarily a fact. And the same thing feels like it's happening here.
Yeah. Well, there is, the promise of treasure at the end of the treasure map or at the end of the adventure.
Yeah. And gold sickness is really a thing. It really is. And it makes people ill. I honestly believe that most of the Europeans at that time were crazy sick with gold sickness. That's what I think. I think they had gold fever to like the nth degree and they used it to horrible ends. And in 2009, author Christopher Stewart attempted to retrace the steps of Theodore Moore in 1940 with the help of the archaeologist Christopher Begley. His book about that search, Jungle Land, is actually on my shelf right now, and it was published in 2013. So people have been searching for the White City, quote unquote, for a couple of hundred years, from Spanish conquistadors all the way through crackpot wannabe scientists like Theodore Moore. Although Christopher Stewart and Christopher Bagley did find some interesting things on their trek through the jungle, they did not actually find the White City they were looking for.
Well, how would they know it's the White City?
Well, I mean, any city. They didn't really find any city. They found evidence of people living in the area. They found a little bit of evidence of like settlements and things like that, but they didn't actually find the pyramids and structures that would indicate an actual city.
Okay, so did they know what they were looking for? Did they find ruins
Well,
of
yeah,
what they
Begley's an
expected?
archaeologist for sure.
Well, but so what were they looking for? How would they know that they had found it?
Okay, so plazas, that would be like square enclosures, temples, stone dwellings, and most importantly, roads. So if you have roads that are attaching one building to another building, that is not something that nature does. It doesn't, create block
Building.
formations in straight lines, right? And it certainly doesn't connect, square and enclosures. So that's the kind of thing that he was looking for, evidence of walls, evidence of, potsherds and sculptures and things like that. And I think they found a few interesting things, but no conclusive details at all.
Okay. Okay.
And it was dangerous, very, very dangerous. They did not actually make it to the place that we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes, but they got close. The very next year, a privately funded airborne LiDAR survey would map several target areas in Mosquitia, the return sketching rectilinear features, platforms, earthworks, and settlement patterns previously masked by canopy. This means that they found square enclosures, they found roads, they found temple complexes, high walls, and they found pyramids. The LiDAR did what hundreds of years of searches could not do, and it did it in just a couple of hours.
Well, it's great technology. I love this, by the way. So I'm going to tangent.
Oh, please do.
Um, so when it first was introduced, there were a lot of problems. You couldn't really get through dense canopy because the laser shoots directly down. It couldn't get a good distance. So actually, let me go a little bit back. Being that we know the speed of light, and there are very complex, very sensitive GPS and altimeters inside the planes that they use, they can accurately calculate how long it takes a photon to leave the laser emitter and either hit a leaf or hit the ground or hit, a
Oh,
building that's hidden below
so
the
this is
canopy.
how it actually works. It's not like just taking like an X-ray of the land and then kind of peeling away layers. That's not how that actually works?
No, it's like sonar. It's
Oh.
like screaming, not screaming. It's like being as loud as you can, and you know how long it takes for the echo to come back. Well, they're just doing that with light.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Well, so when they first started the technology, it had some issues with getting through canopy and over water because, well, if it's over water, the reflection comes back to the receiver and it doesn't know what to do with that data. So you can actually spoil a lot of data that way. And the GPS and the altimeters and the technology really wasn't fine tuned well enough to go through dense canopy. But now they can do it where you can accurately create a 3D model in color of, a whole area. And so using that information, you can examine your computer model and actually go, layer by layer by layer, basically from the topmost leaf and just scan all the way down to the surface of the ground.
That's
It's
so cool.
very, very cool. It's easy to find, as you would say, rectilinear buildings and roadways and other things that aren't naturally produced.
I love science. Thank you, science, for doing the things that many archaeologists over hundreds and hundreds of years couldn't do. 2 thumbs up. So yeah, like LiDAR machines, as far as I know, I don't know how the technology works, so thank you so much for explaining it to me. But they're finding like all kinds of like cities that we just didn't know where they were. We're talking about like in the Middle East and in Egypt and all over the world, and especially here in Central and South America. So it's just so fascinating to me that they just pointed this thing down at the ground and they were like, oh, there it is. You know what I mean? So like I'm pretty sure that they've just discovered a few more cities in like Mexico in the past like 5 years or so. So that's just pretty incredible technology.
I agree that it's great technology. I think that we should probably pull back on revealing mysteries. There's
Why?
well, I understand and I appreciate the archaeological significance and benefit of all of this, but sometimes let's just let a lost city stay lost. There's a
Aw.
benefit to that too. There's a lot of wonder. And also it keeps these places from being overrun by tourists.
In May 2012, press releases issued by a team led by documentary filmmaker Steve Elkins and by the Honduran government about remote sensing exploration using LiDAR renewed interest in the legend. The LiDAR mapping revealed not one, but two large settlements, one of which was the size and core of Copan.
As far as I know, Copan is a ruin and kind of a popular archaeological site. It's near the border of Guatemala and Honduras. It's on the Honduras side, but a lot of people just kind of consider it both ways, or that it could be in both places.
But just to give the White City, the Valley of the Jaguar, some context, we are not discussing a Mayan site, even though it shares sort of regional space with Mayan cities that we might be more familiar with. Although they do share some building practices, this is an entirely different civilization from the Maya, which is fascinating. So now that they know that this place is there, they got to get boots on the ground, right? They got to go send out some archaeologists and some explorers and scientists and figure out, what the hell.
Apparently, they have a rapid assessment team from Conservation International.
What does that mean?
So, sends teams and experts on short expeditions into critically important field sites around the world. Experts at these sites evaluate the state of the region's biodiversity and health of its ecosystems and the multiple benefits that nature provides to people. By doing so, RAP provides information that can guide effective conservation decision making. And that's their thing. They're trying to get in there, get everything cataloged as quickly as possible, and
Well, to preserve it too, so it doesn't get robbed, because that's a big problem with ancient sites that are being rediscovered. Everybody thinks that there's treasure on the ground, and they'll go in there and you know help themselves to things that they really shouldn't.
oh, for sure. Conservation International is much more biology focused.
Oh, very
hmm
interesting. Well, on that note, they did in fact send a small team into the jungle to find out WTF, including personnel like archaeologists, soldiers, and documentarians were inserted by helicopter in 2015 for a brief reconnaissance of one of the valley's sites. They documented surface architecture and a concentration of ritual objects that appeared intentionally gathered at a low platform, then left in situ. The party made only limited, careful collections and then departed. The primary significance was confirmation that the LiDAR forms corresponded to archaeological reality. And the stuff that they found is just incredible. On site, teams recorded plaza edges, platformed mounds, house lot berms, causeways, water management features, and that cache of stolen objects that they left in situ. One of them was a monkey, one of them was a vulture, and one of them was a were jaguar.
Where, Jaguar?
Like a were jaguar, like a werewolf, but it's like a were jaguar.
Do you think that maybe it was a person with a jaguar costume to wear jaguar?
I think they're intimating that it was a god or a godlike figure or a demon or something set about for protection. So it was like a half man, half jaguar.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a really, really I'm gonna add all of the pictures that I have and the LiDAR images and the things that they found in the jungle. I'll add them in the show notes so that you guys can see them too. But yeah, it's because they found this were jaguar that the valley became known as the Valley of the Jaguar instead of the quote unquote white city, because the white city is obviously erroneous. The Valley of the Jaguar is more accurate for this particular culture.
Okay, so other than the jaguar man, what was left in situ? Like any like cool, maybe like a cat toy?
No, there's stone vessels, thrones, a bunch of different like sculptures and bowls and like ceremonial offerings and things like that were left kind of arranged in a circle around each other as if they were like, well, this is for our gods and we're going to leave now, but we're leaving this as a last offering. Kind of like a closing ceremony or something like that. Like, they knew they had to leave for whatever reason, and they were leaving that to scare off demons or protect the place, or I have no idea.
Maybe some kind of capstone, like
Right.
thanks for all the fish.
Yeah. Thank you for the many however many years of life here in the jungle, but we're gonna go now.
So I don't know anything about the people in this area. I know that there were Maya. I know that there were Aztec, but I don't know when those two civilizations rose and had their height. Who built the White City? Do they know that?
Well, they don't actually. So the people that hail from this area, they're called the Petch, and they trace their ancestry to Jameca in the Platano River headwaters near the legendary and lost Ciudad Blanca. Remember, it's their stories that labeled it as the quote unquote white town or white house that would eventually morph into the quote unquote white city that became the legend. There was another group of indigenous peoples known as the Mosquitos and the Ra, and they were both very warlike, and supposedly they would take prisoners of war and conquer their cities and that kind of thing. And beyond the legends of these peoples, we don't really know where this city fits into the equation, when it was abandoned, or why. I have read a lot of books that, and there's a ton of them on the bookshelf behind me right now, that talk about how the Maya ended up abandoning their cities. And this is, about 1,000 years ago. They did so because the aquifers that supported their cities and the agriculture that is required to feed all of the people living in the middle of the jungle started to dry up. So they lacked the water resource to maintain that level of, of civilization in that area. So I won't say that it's likely because I'm not an archaeologist, but I would think, as somebody who's a layman, that probably is a similar situation for these people in this area because you might believe that jungles are a food rich environment, but they're actually not. There are a lot of animals in the jungle, but not all of them are edible for humans. And additionally, there are a lot of plants that if you aren't aware how to process them, like yucca, you can't eat them because they're poisonous for humans. If you are not growing something purposefully with an agricultural lean, meaning like you're setting up the causeways, you're setting up aqueducts and aquifers and et cetera to make sure that your crops are being properly tended, you are most likely not going to achieve the nutrition to support a large population. The indigenous people, such as the Pech, the Tawakas, and the Mosquitoes, talk about a city that cannot be entered, or if regular people enter, they cannot take anything out of it, and if they tell where it is, they will be punished. And on that note, our intrepid explorers, our boots on the ground crew, are about to experience the curse of the White City. As we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, the insect population of this area, the Mosquitia region in Honduras, are pretty significant. And there are all kinds of nasty little surprises waiting for people who are on the ground there that are not prepared. Botflies are one, huge mosquitoes, obviously, the bullet ants we mentioned before, and the worst one of them all, the sandfly. Expedition members included people from National Geographic and also author Douglas Preston, who recorded his entire experience in the jungles of Honduras in his book, The Lost City of the Monkey God. And the title is more an homage to the history of the legends of this area. But in his book, Preston describes that the entire time that they are in the jungle, every single surface is coated in a layer of sandflies. Inside his tent, all over his sleeping quarters, and all over his bedding every night, no matter how many mosquito shields they put up or how much bug spray they used to combat the issue. The point being that the expedition took a lot of time and care trying to combat all of the challenges of the jungle, including its insect population. But no matter what they did, they couldn't keep the sandflies out of their living quarters, out of their food, off of their bodies, anywhere. CJ, would you mind telling us what leishmaniasis is and how it presents and how it's spread and that kind of stuff?
Well, you're already on the right track with the sandflies, which looks like a type of mosquito. Only the
Okay.
female bites, and she needs that protein to make her eggs. But while she bites, if she is infected, she will pass on a type of parasite that causes these ulcers in different spots. They have the mucal leishmaniasis, which shows up in your face or your nose or other mucous membranes. And that was actually common, or it happened in Africa, known as Jericho buttons for those crusaders and those people who were infected.
Wait a minute. You mean crusaders like crusaders?
I mean, like the Crusades.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in Jericho. Those
So it's an old disease. Okay. Okay. Keep going.
Well, it's fairly well documented and it's fairly widespread. Other than it manifesting in the mucous membranes, it can also cause a ulcer or a sore where you were bitten. So maybe they were walking through the jungle, they got bitten, it caused an open wound basically. And as you know, there are lots of other things that can happen with an open wound in
Oh,
the
yeah.
jungle. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit more nefarious to it is black fever, the visceral
The visceral kind.
version.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll cause fever. It can increase the size of your liver, cause anemia, increase the size of your spleen. Things that are changing inside of you, really critical organs. And what's even worse is that type of leishmaniasis can manifest a couple years later.
Oh,
So,
shit.
yeah, so maybe even a person makes it through the first attack or doesn't have any symptoms, but then dies a few years later. That can really, mess a lot of people up and make them wonder, well, the last person that went down there, 6 months after they got back, they died.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so that can really add to a lot of the mystery.
So that's like a true curse, then. In other words, that's like a living curse. You catch this disease from a sandfly bite, and a sandfly, I guess, is a mosquito. I didn't know that sandflies and mosquitoes were related. I thought they were two different species. Um,
They might be two different species.
but like, so you can't keep them out of your tent. And you can't keep them off of your person, and they're just around you in a cloud like the entire time that you're in this area. So they were like bound to get it, is kind of how it feels to me. So that's kind of like the living curse, right? The curse of the White City, quote unquote, is a living curse that all of these people contracted.
Yeah, and being that it takes so long for it to show up, it's either immediate or, months or years later. Yeah, it can certainly seem like a curse.
I guess the next question that I have is like, is it only in like the, I don't know, equatorial regions? Is that where it's the most common? Or can it be anywhere else?
They do know that it's in the subtropics of Africa, Asia, the Americas, and even in Southern Europe, which, I consider kind of fairly developed. And
Yeah.
they would have taken care of something like this.
I mean, like when you say sub Europe, are you talking about like the south of France or southern Italy or something like that?
Well, yeah, I would say Southern Europe, places that would have a tropical climate with the sandfly and the parasite.
So in Douglas Preston's book, The Lost City of the Monkey God, he describes that the crew and members of the expedition had actually contracted the visceral version, which is the worst version of leishmaniasis. He would go on to say that there weren't many treatments available in 2015 outside of Johns Hopkins University, and treatments were astronomically expensive for this particular strain of leishmaniasis. In his book, Douglas Preston posits that perhaps leishmaniasis was brought to the New World from the Old World, and it could be the reason why this culture no longer exists. Quote, this strain of leishmaniasis that befell us is a rare example of a New World disease attacking mostly Old World people. The world is now divided into third and first, not old and new. Pathogens once confined to the third world are now making deadly inroads into the first. This is the future trajectory of disease on planet Earth. Pathogens have no boundaries. They are the ultimate travelers. They go wherever there's human fuel. We first worlders have become far too complacent in the idea that disease, especially NTDs, can be quarantined to the third world and that we can live safely in our communities supposedly gated against pathogens, ignoring the suffering of the poor and sick in faraway lands. End quote. While I can certainly agree with some of the things that Preston posits here, for example, that we should be a lot more cognizant and compassionate about diseases, especially as they relate to human beings, it is important to note that we don't have a solid archaeological date in place for when this culture disappeared, and it is very likely that it disappeared around the same time as the Maya, if not shortly afterward. Which, as many of us are likely aware, happened probably hundreds of years before the Spanish conquistadors arrived. So that would not necessarily make the case for leishmaniasis being the cause of the evacuation of the Valley of the Jaguar. It's also important to note that the expedition did draw a lot of archaeological ire and a lot of criticism, particularly with regards to the find and the way that the find was treated. Rosemary Joyce, a Mesoamerican specialist and expert on Honduran archaeology from UC Berkeley, called it, quote, bad archaeology. This is at least the fifth time someone's announced that they found the White City. There is no White City. The White City is a myth. I'm quite biased against this group of people because they are adventurers and not archaeologists. They're after spectacle, end quote. However, she would later confirm that the images LiDAR produced and were taken at the site did show what appeared to be archaeological features and remarked that there were what seemed to be, quote, three major clusters of larger structures, a plaza, a public space par excellence, and a possible ball court, and many housing mounds, end quote. In his book, Preston noted, quote, she guessed that the site dated from the late or post-classic period between 500 and 1000 AD or CE. And it should also be noticed that Douglas Preston himself has not been above criticism. His book has been criticized by experts from archaeologists to biologists and etymologists, especially epidemiologists who criticize his characterization of leishmaniasis and also the treatments available to him during the time period. Today, leishmaniasis treatment options are wider and more accessible in the Americas than many headlines imply. Depending on species and presentation, therapies include pentavalent antimonials, liposomal amphotericin B, and other regimens. Most preferred treatment options favor liposomal amphotericin B due to shorter treatment courses and fewer adverse effects. That is to say that even though we lack a permanent cure, the treatment options, which are pretty terrible, are still preferable to what will happen to you if you ignore the disease. Naturally, the publicity machine jumped very quickly from map settlements to Lost City Found, sometimes calling it the City of the Monkey God or Ciudad Blanca or combining the two of them together. But again, even though these make gripping headlines, the terminology erroneously combines indigenous knowledge with scant archaeological evidence and popular fiction. Many more archaeologists than Rosemary Joyce have publicly objected to the framing, warning that the quote, lost city hype ignores prior research, overwrites living communities, and invites looting. Even members of the research team that attended in 2015 stressed that they have not proven the legendary Ciudad Blanca tale, only documented previously unmapped sites. In parallel, critics argued that Douglas Preston's best-selling book leaned hard into expedition peril and disease at the expense of cultural context. So yes, they did in fact discover a series of settlements in the Valley of the Jaguar, and it is off limits to everyone but people approved by the Honduran government and guarded, by the way, so don't get any ideas. But this discovery is still being studied and will be being studied for decades before we can form any sort of opinion one way or the other about what happened to them with any definitive voice. The Mosquitia region is a World Heritage Site. Ongoing stewardship of the site and the valley itself involves Honduran institutions in consultation with local and indigenous communities, weighing research access, protection against looting, and environmental limits. So, what does all of this mean? Yes, there is a series of settlements that exist in the jungles of Mosquitia, which certainly leans toward confirmation of local and indigenous legends for the past 400 years. What is also true is that the site is far more interesting ecologically and archaeologically than all of our previous sources would even intimate. What happened to these people and why they abandoned their cities is still a mystery that we have yet to unravel. And whether or not our intrepid explorers did in fact experience the curse of the White City, well, I think that's left for imagination. What do you think, CJ?
With the discovery of the truth around this city, it gives us a lot more opportunity to check it out. But there will be tourists that go down there, and they will always have an impact on the local biology, the local artifacts, picking something up. Often, tourism changes the local society and culture, economics of the area. I think that with the more of a scientific mystery, we will lose a lot of the more romantic mystery of the White City.
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the truth being uncovered, to your point. But at the same time, I feel like, can we ever really fully solve a mystery like this? We know a lot about the Maya now, for example. And we've only really been able to glean a lot of those details in the past 150 years or so. So, like, there's more to learn every single year. The same could be said for ancient Egypt. We're still learning things. We've been digging in the deserts of Egypt to find out more about that culture for over 200 years. And we are still learning stuff every single year. And I think that's awesome. I think that's fascinating. And there's many other parts of the world that LiDAR is revealing these secret cities and these secret civilizations and things that we've completely forgotten about as humans. And I think that that is fascinating. But to your point, I don't know that anyone is going to be visiting the Valley of the Jaguar anytime soon for multiple reasons, one of which being the prevalence of the sandflies in the region and leishmania being a concern, and also because the jungle is extremely difficult to traverse. It is very, very dense. And also, the Honduran government is not allowing any visitation of any kind. If you don't have a permit and you are not escorted by a military escort, you're not going to this site. It's guarded with guns. So I'm not sure that they're going to experience an influx of tourism for this particular region anytime soon.
Well, also there are drug gangs, or there's
Oh,
drug
yes.
trafficking in the area.
Yes, there is.
There are poachers. There are a lot of people that don't want to get caught doing the things that they're doing that have nothing to do, or they don't want to get caught with their illegal actions, even though that has nothing to do with the White City.
You're absolutely right. The Honduran jungle is not a place that's friendly to tourists anyway, full stop, for a variety of reasons, and that would be one of them.
However, the deforestation, the drug trafficking, the human trafficking, so much is moving through that area that if we don't study it, we're going to lose any chance of seeing it pristine or seeing it as the original builders left it. So I guess we have to walk on a very narrow path. Can we study and preserve while still beating the clock or being spoilt by human activity in the area?
I guess that's the question, right? Can we preserve these sites for, human historical posterity without completely trampling them to dust? And that is a huge question mark for me and for everyone who is interested in studying history at all. The biggest problem that we have with discovering the past and recording it for posterity is us. Humans are the biggest issue in almost every respect. Environmentally, with regards to wildlife and flora and fauna, special interest groups and foreign greed, and then even the most well intentioned adventurer or archaeological enthusiast, those people can cause all kinds of problems too, just because they don't stop searching for these areas, trampling evidence, and then going someplace where they're not invited and, helping themselves to souvenirs. I read an article once that the major issue they have at sites like Tikal are from tourists and the trampling and damaging of archaeological sites based on just the amount of people that are constantly back and forthing that area. And let's not forget, if we're going to talk about Egypt, those sites are constantly being traversed by tourists. And up to very, very recently, you used to be able to climb up all the way to the top of the Great Pyramid as someone who wasn't a scientist, as someone who was not like taking a survey or doing anything that was to preserve the site for posterity. It was literally just, flow and stand from Idaho, just hoofing it up to the top and then taking little bits of rock back home with them. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we can preserve these sites and record all of the information that needs to be recorded so that we understand humanity and how we moved around this planet better, unless we also address how people are going to interact with it on a non-scientific level.
I'd keep it closed. The reason for it is you're going to have ecotourism, but the adventure kind, the extreme ecotourism, eventually something like this could turn into a new Mount Everest where
Oh god.
10,000 people show up in a day
Wow.
and, some of them die, but that's part of the mystique and the fun of it.
I have lots of big feelings about Mount Everest, and we're actually going to do an episode about that. But I take your point. That is a good point. But here's the other thing. Like, I want to see this place too. I do. And I'm not a disrespectful dickhead. I'm not going to go in there and like throw, Skittles wrappers all over the place and try to take my own souvenirs. But seeing something like this, being connected with your past in that way, that's kind of like a human right, I think. So I'm on the fence about it. I really don't know what is the most effective way to show people this wonderful history without destroying it. I think probably the only way that it could be managed, like ethically on both sides, would be if it was managed and maintained and like had set like people limits on it, like you can only bring 100 people a year through or something like that, and let the native populations manage that because it's their land. So what if we treated it like Habasupai, where the Navajo are in control over who is allowed to visit the site and how many people are able to get permits per year or per season, so that they're constantly monitoring who is there. They've got a record of who is there and, kind of limiting the flow of people to these precious sites. What do you think about that?
I still don't like it. I would keep it closed, except, very select people that have a legitimate reason for trying to go to this site.
Yeah.
If we want to get connected to our heritage, if we want to see just humanity's past, there are plenty of other places to go that are already opened up. Just leave a mystery.
Okay. Well, I can't say that you're wrong. I do think that for me personally, I think that most of us are not jerks. Most human beings are not jerks. I think that it's just a problem when we're in large numbers.
Exactly. That is the thing.
So, what if we just manage the amount of people that are allowed to visit the site and that produces tourism dollars that support the preservation of the site and of the jungle itself?
I don't think that you're going to be able to talk me out of this one. The mystery of the White City should remain the mystery of the White City.
Okay. What do you guys, listeners, what do you think about this? And do you think that if they ever open up the site for tourism, like how do you think that should be managed? And, would you be a person that would want to go see this city? And what would your commitment be to its preservation? So, to wrap this up, LiDAR gave us a map, field notes gave us dates, features, and a cache under the leaves. I think that the most important part of this legend is how many of us it has captivated and how long it has endured. Let it be a lesson for humankind that in order to preserve our past, our secrets, and our histories, we must also preserve the environment and the landscapes in which we dwell. Thank you for stopping by the Time and Tales podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the show, leave a brief review, and share it with a friend. That's how we grow. Links and sources are in the notes. For updates, you can find me at LM Revere Author on TikTok and Instagram.
All right, bye. Bye, guys.
Till next time, guys.